Morale comes from 4 main sources, and I think I've heard a lot of this, not all of these from you just now. 4 main sources of morale. Now you're going to see these percentages up there. I just want to say right up front, we made those up. We makes us look smart when we actually have percentages next to our items. So, but we didn't pull them out of thin air, right? This is based on a lot of research. There's not one piece of research. There's not a single piece of research that gives us those 4 numbers. But when you look at the research together and kind of aggregate it, you get these ratios. As you'll hear me say, though, in a very few minutes, I think these are a little off still, but let's go into it. 4 sources of morale. We're going to start with this one, and I didn't really hear this one yet, so let's talk about this. How many of you would agree that there is some some personal responsibility for your own morale? Everybody agree with that? Now, when I say that, everybody agrees, and in fact, when they agree, they usually think, well, that should not just be 8% then, because that's huge. So let me tell you why we're keeping this so low, because I agree with the 8%, and here's why. Now, I know this isn't kindergarten, but all together now, I want you out loud to read with me the 2 words in the middle. Workplace morale. All right. What it doesn't say is personal happiness. And I want to make sure you get that those are not the same thing. There's a bit of an overlap, let's say, 8%, but we're going to call this is not personal happiness. And here's what we mean by that. I have met some really healthy, happy individual people who have really bad workplace morale. And I've met some really unhealthy, unhappy people who have really good workplace morale. Because workplace morale is a function of the workplace. Now, yes, there's an individual component. Remember we talked about those people that aren't going to be happy unless they're unhappy? Well, I've also met people that could work anywhere and have great morale. I've met those people, but that's not you. And I don't mean to insult anyone in the room, but statistically, you're probably not one of those people on either side of that. Think of it as a bell curve. Okay, think of it as a bell curve. And think of the very end of the tails. Those are those people that could have high morale no matter what kind of workplace they're working in, or could have low morale no matter what kind of workplace they're working in. That's not us. Most of us are somewhere else in that bell curve, and we are highly impacted by the workplace. But when I say workplace, I don't just mean the physical workplace. I mean that whole list that you just created. Those things impact the average person. So we're going to give this 8%. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Now, what this leads to is a side note. It's not up here on purpose, but I'm going to give you a side note here. Let's talk about money for a minute. You're not going to see salaries and money and stuff like that, or even bennies up here. And let's talk about why that is. What they find in the research is that when you give employees a raise, it does increase their workplace morale for 3 weeks. And then what happens to their morale after that? It's right back where it was before. Because what's not happening 6 months after their raise is they're driving to work thinking, God, I hate my boss and meetings suck, but I really have high morale because of that raise I got 6 months ago. No, you know what that raise is affecting at that point? Personal happiness, not workplace morale. Does that ring true? So this is what the research tells us about money. Now here's where it gets a little bit aggravating. Financial money issues actually can hurt morale, though. They can't really help it, right? Well, they could if you decide to give all your people raises every 3 weeks. That would be awesome, right? That's the one way, except for accounting, they have really bad morale. But in reality, money issues can hurt morale, meaning I'm not getting paid the same as you, but we do the same work. I feel like we're equal in our skills and our background, but I'm getting paid less than you. That's going to be a longer term morale hit. And that's not about money. What's that about? That's about fairness, isn't it? That's about fairness, right? Or I'm not getting paid enough to meet my needs. That actually can hurt my morale at work. But can't really help my morale. Money on the other side doesn't really increase morale. So does that surprise anybody? All right. Well, yeah. It's funny because, again, as I've watched companies struggle with morale, they get these company surveys back, and we have a morale problem. They do a lot of things. jeans on Friday and morale committees and let's deal with money, and it never scratches the itch. It's deeper than those things. All right, so that's the first one. Morale is also impacted by the people you work with every day, right? And I heard people talking about trust and respect. Our morale obviously is going to be impacted by these people that I spend more than half my waking hours with. And by the way they treat me, how open they are. Do they honor diversity? Do I feel included? I heard people talk about inclusion. I mean, there's lots of things here that are going to come from these great people I get to work with or these people I hate working with, right? That's going to impact my morale at work. Does that ring true for everybody? The third category. This is a big one, meaning we're going to break this one down a little bit. It's the work. It's the work I do impacts morale. And we're going to break this down into 4 categories, and I'm going to ask you to take a really quick side trip with me. We're going to turn the page, but we're going to come back. So turn your page. The work itself impacts morale in 4 different ways. Number 1, I like it. I like the work, obviously, right? The work I've chosen, the career I'm in, the work I've chosen to do, I enjoy it. And that's pretty obvious. That's pretty intuitive, right? That's a piece of morale. The challenge competency continuum, and we're going to take a minute on this one. This is really important. I feel challenged and I feel competent at the same time. Now, it's a little wiggly here to think in terms of like where's the right place to be here. Imagine this being sort of a perfect spot right here. Don't think of this as mediocre on both. Think of this as the perfect spot, right? You should know, and when I say should, I don't mean that in a shaming way, but as a general rule, you should know where your employee would put him or herself on this continuum. You should just know that. And obvious question here, how are you going to find that out? Right, that was rocket science, wasn't it? How are you going to find that out, right? What would it feel like if you asked your employee, right, where would you put yourself on the challenge competency continuum? And they said, well, I'm here. How do you think they're feeling at work? Overwhelmed, stressed. They don't have the time, they don't have the tools, they don't have the people, they don't have the skills. They're never able to go home at night and feel good about what they got done today or what they accomplished, right? How might they be feeling if they said they're over here? Bored, right? And both of these, and there's going to be some brain research on this, tend to engage our sympathetic nervous system. Both of these actually shut down learning. Both of these extremes shut down personal growth. We really have a hard time advancing as human beings when we're stuck over here or we're stuck over here. So let's say you asked your employee, hey, where would you put yourself, Jim, on this continuum over the last 6 months? And Jim said, well, I'm here. Okay, your next question is going to be, where would you like to be, right? And I'm going to guess he's going to put himself somewhere closer to the middle. Now, what's your next question? What can we do to get you there? All right, I like the work. I'm somewhere reasonable on the challenge competency continuum. My work feels important. There's meaning to my work. I'm doing good in this world. I'm helping the world, the community, people, the environment, kids, whatever. I'm making the world a better place somehow, in some way. And the organization is winning, or they're successful, or they're doing a good job. I'm proud of my organization. So you put these together, and those spell this 15% work circle. Now, I bet you money you all know what the 4th circle is called, more or less. What's the word we're going to put in the 4th circle? It's leadership. Yep, you got it. It's leadership. And it makes sense. In fact, according to research, 80% of people who quit their jobs are not really quitting their job. They're quitting their boss, according to research, according to exit interviews. So clearly, we're talking about the main source of morale being leadership. Now, here's what I mean by our numbers maybe a little off. We're going to do a little bit of math, and I hope no one told you there'd be no math. So would you guys go back a page now? And please do not get out a calculator. I want you to estimate this. Do not get out a calculator. What percentage of those items could you put into the green circle? Take a look at that and talk about that at your table for about a minute. Look at that list and ask yourself, how many of those things, what percentage of those things could you conceivably put into the green circle? I assume you're way above 65%? Yeah. Like way above 65%? How many of you would have said probably 85 or more? Yeah. Now, you might not have got super robust on these other ones, so I think it still evens out, but I tell you what, I think this is low. In fact, you see why I could even borrow some points from here? And I could borrow some points from here? Let's look at that one for a second. I've got this coworker who's been being a jerk for 2 years. Who am I going to be annoyed with besides the coworker? The person who should have held that person accountable, right? Right. So you can borrow some points here. Now, again, I'm going to use this phrase one more time. I know I'm preaching to the choir in the sense that, we're talking about morale, we're talking about leadership being the source of morale. This is not rocket science. But I do believe that most managers don't actually have this concept on their radar. And we're going to actually get a little bit deeper into this. I would tell you what, I was in an organization, right, actually about a mile from here, please don't try to guess, and I was vetting them as they were vetting us, and I was looking at their manual. They have this this employee workbook, or a manual, and there's a section in their manual called employee responsibilities. And the very first bullet point, I'm not even kidding, said, employees shall have high morale. What do you think the punishment is when you don't have high morale, right, in that organization?
Like that old teacher used to see, the meetings will continue.
Until morale increases. That's exactly right. I mean that was the first thing I thought of when I read this. This was a real-life Dilbert cartoon right in front of me, right? Employees shall have high morale, right? Which shows an absolute misunderstanding of this concept of morale. Because workplace morale is not a function of the individual employee more than about 8%.
Did you take them on as a client?
I actually did. I wasn't our most successful client, but let's not talk about that. So, to believe that morale is the employee's job is focusing solely, of course, on the orange circle, and it's going to be a huge miss, right? Because that's not what it's about.